All right. Diving into the psychology of power today, and we've got some excerpts here talking about the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
It really is. You know how, like, you might act differently at a party than you would in a job interview?
Sure.
Well, this experiment takes that idea, but, like, to the extreme. And the results, let's just say they're unsettling. We're talking about regular college guys transformed by the situation. It got really intense.
Yeah. What's wild is that they had to stop the experiment early. Things got out of control way too fast.
Okay, so for those who don't know this story, can you paint us a picture, set the scene? What was the Stanford Prison Experiment?
Okay, so picture this. 1971, the basement of Stanford University. They turned this basement into a mock prison. Their goal: to figure out just how much our surroundings, the situation, can actually influence how we behave, even if we think we're totally in control.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Dr. Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist in charge, he gets a group of young men, all considered psychologically healthy, no red flags. Then, totally at random flip of a coin, basically they're assigned to be either a prisoner or a guard.
Okay, so there are no pre-existing differences in the groups then. Right from the start, that's important. So they didn't go picking certain types of guys to be guards or prisoners.
Nope, totally random. Which makes the results even more impactful. To make it feel real, the prisoners were even arrested at their homes by real police officers. Fingerprints, the whole deal. They were stripped of their identities, given numbers instead of names, and dressed in those, prison uniforms.
Wow, talk about being thrown into something.
Yeah, no easing into it at all.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, the guards, they got uniforms too. Plus whistles, those mirrored sunglasses.
Oh yeah, the sunglasses, right, to keep them anonymous.
Exactly. And of course, they had their billy clubs. They were told to maintain order, but they were given a lot of leeway in how to actually do that.
Okay, yeah, I can already see how that could create some, how do we say it? An intense experience.
Intense is a good word.
So how long did it take for things to, like, really go off the rails?
So day one was actually pretty calm. Everyone's just kind of getting their bearings in this weird new reality. But day two things took a hard turn. Some of the prisoners in one of the cells, they staged a full-on rebellion.
Whoa!
Yeah, they barricaded themselves inside, refused to come out, and the guards, well, let's just say they weren't too happy about it.
I bet they weren't. What happened?
Things escalated, and fast. The guards called in reinforcements, broke up that rebellion using force, stripped the prisoners naked.
No way.
Yeah. And then they threw the ringleaders into solitary confinement.
Hold on, solitary confinement. What did that even look like in this fake prison?
They had this thing called the hole. A tiny dark closet, basically. Imagine being stuck in there, naked, after having your little rebellion totally squashed.
Man, that's intense, even just hearing about it now. So this rebellion, that was the turning point then.
It changed everything. The whole experiment shifted after that, got a lot darker. From that point on, the guards, their behavior just became more and more harsh. Sleep deprivation, verbal abuse, punishments designed to humiliate. And the prisoners, stripped of their identities and constantly under pressure, they started showing some serious signs of stress. In some cases, full-blown breakdowns.
So it's day two, the prisoners have rebelled, and the guards, well, they've shown they're not afraid to assert their authority.
No kidding. And keep in mind, these are just regular guys.
Yeah.
College students. But things are about to get even more intense.
Oh, man. More intense? How?
One prisoner, he was known only by his assigned number, 899.
Just a number?
Exactly. It was all part of dehumanizing them. Anyway, prisoner 819, he has this complete emotional breakdown. Just starts sobbing uncontrollably. The thing is, he was convinced that he couldn't leave the experiment. He felt like he had to prove that he wasn't a bad prisoner.
Oh, wow. Talk about feeling trapped. That's got to do a number on your mind. Just a number, literally. It just goes to show, right, how real those roles became in their heads. It wasn't just acting anymore.
No, not at all. They were living it. And that's actually a key psychological concept here, role-induced behavior.
Yeah.
It's the idea that the roles we play, they don't just change how we act on the surface. They actually get into our heads, start to shape our thoughts and actions on a deeper level.
So, like, those guards, they might have thought, oh, I'm just playing a part. But their behavior is changing, becoming more aggressive, even cruel. And it's not because they were bad guys to begin with.
That's the scary part. And that's what makes this experiment so unsettling even decades later. It really makes you question this whole nature versus nurture thing. Are we all just products of our environment?
I mean, if these ordinary guys can turn so mean in that experiment, what does that say about the rest of us?
Exactly. It's a huge question.
Okay, so we've got this experiment, as messed up as it was, and it's given us a lot to think about for sure. But someone listening right now might be thinking, okay, but I'm never going to be stuck in some fake prison. So how does this actually relate to the real world? How does any of this impact me? What would you say to them?
You know what? That's the question. But here's the thing. This experiment showed us that in the wrong circumstances, and it doesn't have to be a prison, right? Almost anyone is capable of cruelty, of taking things too far.
Makes sense.
And then you add those excerpts you were talking about earlier, all about elitist groups, the super powerful. Well, let's just say it makes you think twice, right?
It does. Elitist groups, those at the top, they operate by a different set of rules. Politicians, CEOs, even those influencers with millions of followers.
Exactly. They've got power, and this experiment is basically saying, watch out when power goes unchecked.
So you're saying that what we saw in that prison study, the way the guards behaved, the authoritarianism, the dehumanization, that stuff plays out in the real world too, just on a bigger, more impactful scale.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, there are real-world examples everywhere you look. Think about the financial crisis back in 2008.
Oh.
You had this small group of, super powerful financial players, and they were operating with basically no oversight, no one keeping them in check. And their actions, what they did, had huge, disastrous consequences for the entire world. The whole global economy was shaken.
And probably still is, in a way.
Exactly. Or what about political corruption? That's a big one. You see it in some countries where a tiny group of elites, they basically hold all the power, and they use it to enrich themselves at the expense of everyone else.
Yeah.
That's unchecked power in action.
Yeah, and it's like they forget that they're dealing with actual human beings, people with families, lives, dreams.
It's a scary kind of disconnect.
Yeah.
And, those excerpts you mentioned, they also talked about the role of media in all of this.
Oh, right. Powerful in a different way.
Huge influence. The media can be used to shape public opinion, right? And sometimes that means shaping it in a way that benefits the people who are already in control.
Which is why it's more important than ever to really think critically about the information that's thrown at us, right? Be aware of our own biases and all that.
You got it. We're not just helpless bystanders here. We can choose how we respond to power, both when we have it and when we're on the receiving end of it.
It's true. And when you really start thinking about power dynamics, how easily things can go wrong, it's easy to feel a little, powerless yourself. But you're right. We do have choices. So what can we actually do about all of this?
I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
The book doesn't just leave us hanging with this doom and gloom. It actually dives into some potential solutions, some big picture stuff, some more personal,
Okay, well, I'm all ears. Lay it on me. What's the plan?
Well, for one, the author talks a lot about the importance of having strong governance. Laws that actually prevent power from becoming too concentrated. It can't just be in the hands of a select few, right?
Right.
We're talking about things like transparency in government, in corporations. Being able to see how decisions are being made, who benefits, and of course accountability. Making sure those in power are actually answerable for the choices they make, not just calling all the shots without consequences.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those big systemic solutions are key for sure. But it's also a little overwhelming, how can we as just regular people really influence those kinds of systems?
I get it. It can feel daunting. But remember, those systems, as big and powerful as they seem, they're ultimately made up of individuals.
Right.
And this is where personal responsibility comes in. The book really, really stresses that it's not just about, pointing fingers at the powerful. It's about looking inward, too, checking our own Curdian behavior.
So it's like that saying, be the change you want to see.
Exactly. Because we all have some degree of power and influence, whether we realize it or not. Whether we're leading a team at work, raising a family, or just, interacting with our friends. It's about asking ourselves, am I using whatever influence I have in an ethical way? Am I even considering how my actions might impact other people?
It's true. It's so easy to get caught up in our own little bubbles. We forget how even small things, small decisions, they can ripple outwards, affect people around us.
Absolutely. And the book even gives some practical tips for cultivating that self-awareness, which I thought was really cool. Things like really nailing down your personal values, knowing what you stand for, and then being willing to seek feedback from others. Because sometimes we need that outside perspective, like, hey, is this sitting right? Am I living up to my own values here?
Yeah, being open to hearing that feedback, even if it's not what we want to hear.
Definitely not always easy, but so important.
Man, this has been such a fascinating conversation. We've gone from a crazy experiment in a basement to like these real world power dynamics to things we can actually do in our own lives. This is what I love about these deep dives.
Me too. And speaking of deep dives, you're not going to believe this, but the author ends the book on a pretty radical note, like way out there.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So they talk about, get this, a moneyless society.
Hold on, what? A world without money? How would that even...
Right. It's a huge, radical idea. And the book only touches on it briefly, but the suggestion is that a society without money, think about that, could actually be a pathway towards true equality.
Interesting.
Because imagine a world where we're not all driven by profit or individual gain, but like a shared purpose. Making sure everyone's basic needs are met, that kind of thing.
I mean, it's a really interesting thought experiment. It's like hitting the reset button on our entire system. But could it actually work? I don't even know.
That's the million-dollar question, right? And to be fair, the author acknowledges that there would be a whole new set of challenges to figure out. Like, how do you make sure resources are distributed fairly in a moneyless society? And what about motivation? How do you motivate people to contribute, to work, if there's no traditional paycheck?
Yeah, makes you think.
It's not about having all the answers right now.
Yeah.
It's about asking the right questions, pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible. And who knows, those questions could lead to solutions that we can't even imagine right now.
That's a great point, and I think that's a perfect place to leave it for today. This whole conversation, it's given me so much to think about. The psychologies of power, the dangers of unchecked authority, but also, our own roles in all of this. It's a lot to process.
It is. But I think the most important thing to remember is this. We're not passive players here. We have choices to make, ways to use our influence for good, and ultimately, the power to create a more just and equitable world however we can.
Well said. For all you deep divers out there, thank you for joining us on this journey, exploring the fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of power. We'll leave you with this. Could a world without money truly be more equitable? Or would we just find new ways to create hierarchies, new ways to hold on to power? Something to ponder. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those conversations flowing. We'll catch you on our next deep dive.